because people come back for people. People do not come back for pillows.
Did you know that 71% of consumers prefer to buy from companies that are aligned with their values? If your hotel is struggling with average reviews or hiring the right people or extremely dependent on the OTAs, this podcast is for you.
Spend so much money investing in our brand, right? We focus on logos and taglines and Pantone colors and imagery, social content, architecture, aesthetics, all the pretty stuff, all the stuff that is needed. That is the skeleton, the bones that start to bring your brand and give it structure. But when we really step back and look at it, it's the people that awaken the brand, right? They are the soul of the brand. They're what makes the property come to life. And so that's why it's so important to be intentional with how the brand promise is written, values and expected employee behaviors. So it's imperative to invest equally, if not more.
What's up, hospitality? My name is Mauricio Schüler, and you are listening to the Schüler Hub Talking Hospitality podcast. Today with Mary Mattson-Quagliana from the hospitality consulting firm Kaya Knight & Co. She taught us the importance to align hotel values with the brand promise, the significance of training in delivering these values, and the role of leadership in fostering a positive culture. In the end, we still discuss what the new generation is looking for when booking their travels. It's time to chat and learn something new with Schüler today. Hello, Schüler, and welcome to another episode of the Schüler Hub Talking Hospitality podcast. Today, we are discussing something very unique. How to put a soul into your hotel brand. For this, I invited Mary Mattson-Quagliana, I say your name right, to talk to us. Mary, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mauricio. I'm thrilled to be here with you today.
Now, I'm thrilled to have you here because putting a soul in your hotel brand is something that we've been discussing. We're going to get a little bit more in depth on understanding what it is to put a soul and try to educate our audience here of independent hoteliers to understand a little bit better about how to do their hotel branding, something that can connect with their guests. But before we get to that point, we always get to the human side first and try to learn more about you. So, Mary, who were you? Did you fall into hospitality by chance, or was your life dream?
I've always had a passion for travel. I've always loved learning new cultures and meeting new people. And I don't know if I ever thought hospitality would be my profession. I have to tell you, I had this one professor in college. He was just so inspirational in how you can really connect with people and get paid for it. Like, who wouldn't want to do this? I mean, if you can't have fun in our industry, you can't have fun anywhere. So I definitely think I fell into it more, but for the passion that was always within me.
So what's his name? Let's make a call out for someone that's inspirational, please.
Dr. Van Harsel. He was an awesome professor I had at Niagara University. Just fantastic. He was a huge supporter. One of the things I always think about with him, two things. He always said, as you start your career, always have a smile folder. I'm like, a smile folder? He said, because so many times people focus on the negative. He said, so when you get those thank you cards or those online that recognize you specifically, you print that or you take those cards and you put it into a folder. And I was like, great idea. And so I did. I started one of those way back when, and I focus on the positive and not just like, why not like that? And look at things differently from a different perspective.
From university, from falling into hospitality, you had an amazing career with Rosewood Hotels.
I did. I actually started off at the Carlisle Hotel in New York City. And, hospitality is a 24/7 business. And I'll never forget, I interviewed at the Carlisle on 5:30 p.m. on a Friday. And I should have known then what my life would look like. It was amazing. You're always there. And what a better place. You can't be at a better place than the Carlisle. And One thing that it really taught me, it's such an elevated hospitality there because the people that stay there are legendary. But honestly, the more legendary people are the employees that work there. Just the quality and the care and the recognition that they bring to every single guest. It's funny, when the guests get equally excited to see them, you've got a connection. You have something special. So I started my career there, and then I moved to the corporate office for Rosewood Hotels and Resorts, and I took on the role of Director of Learning and Development. I was responsible for all the training around the world, opening all of our properties, our existing properties, transitioning properties. And, our philosophy at Rosewood was sense of place. How do you continue to bring this culture and be an ambassador for this culture, yet still remaining local and understanding and keeping that feel, but at the same time have this bigger picture? And so it's always fun, unique, and the people that you meet are absolutely incredible. And then, such a pleasure, and every single person you met, you learned something from. And then I left to what I thought would be a stay-at-home mom, and that lasted for 3 months because I started getting phone calls once they realized I left Rosewood, and they said, "Do you want to do some project work?" And I said, "Okay." Well, project work then turned into starting my own business, and which I'm very thankful for because I always loved the business, the strategy, how to think of things differently, and the creative aspect of it. And so I had my most challenging and rewarding job as mom, and still being able to enjoy what I do and my other passion in life other than my family. So I started my own company. And then 2 years ago, one of my former coworkers and always friend had her own consulting company, but she came from the operations background. And we really partnered up in 2002 when we recognized through conversations that our industry was missing something. With her ops background and my leadership development background, we really complemented each other nicely in order to form Kyanite & Co., which is our company now. And we recognize that with all of the standards being measured, all of the online presence, industry is not being measured on their brand promise. And how are we really focused on our brand promise and knowing if we're really living who we say we are? So we started something called Curated Critique, one of our offerings. It's been really fun and eye-opening. It's been an educational shift because I think as hoteliers, we're so focused on the standards and we have to meet the standards and this, and this. And it's interesting when people started calling me, they're like, "Hey, Mary, can you come do this training? I need standards training." And while that might be true, my conversation is always, how is your culture? Because just focusing on your standards is not going to change. Because if you train someone on standards right the first time, you might want to refresh or brush up on them, but they know what they are. So there's something happening at the culture at a deeper level that they're not bought in and owning the brand in order to execute the standards, because that's really the byproduct of the brand are the standards. So will I do training standards? Sure, as long as you can show me that you're really living your culture.
Wow, but it's so good to have you here because it makes your experience into learning development and training leadership, because that's basically what we're trying to achieve here, getting our leaders some new ideas and look into themselves, into their own business and say, like, what can I do better, right? The goal is always, what can I do better today to our business? Not about the competition, is how can I improve our own processes, our own, just let them say, and see how we can serve our guests better. So thank you very much for being here. And let's get to educate them on putting a soul into the hotel brand. And I will start with this because we started talking about culture, values already. What does it mean to put a soul into a brand?
I think that's such a great question because we spend so much money investing in our brand, right? We focus on logos and taglines and Pantone colors and imagery, social content, architecture, aesthetics, all the pretty stuff, all the stuff that is needed. That is the skeleton, the bones that start to bring your brand and give it structure. But when we really step back and look at it, it's the people that awaken the brand, right? They are the soul of the brand. They're what makes the property come to life. And so that's why it's so important to be intentional with how the brand promise is written, values, and expected employee behaviors. So it's imperative to invest equally, if not more, the people as we do into the skeleton, into the pretty of it, into the aesthetic, into the ending piece of it, the logos, because people come back for people. People do not come back for pillows.
Well said that. If we could try to simplify to the hotelier that is thinking about like, okay, but what do you really mean about having a strong brand? What are the key elements of a strong hotel brand for you? Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the show and if you're learning something new today, please consider following the show, subscribe to our channel, or leave us a review. It helps us to help more people through the podcast, and it would mean the world to us. Thank you for listening, and we're back on the chat.
A strong hotel brand starts with an uncompromising culture, And that means operationalizing your vision, operationalizing your mission, operationalizing your values. And what are those key differentiators that make the property unique, right? Hotel brand that can speak to the actions and behaviors that support the brand promise. It's really the marketing both to your guests as well as your potential employee. You market to your desired audience that both stays at your place and works at your place. And so when values are aligned, that is when loyalty happens, both with guests and employees.
Yeah, well, we had a conversation with Mattson-Quagliana, and he's a recruiter, and he was saying about the same thing, about how important it is to have your values and your mission aligned and clear explained so you can hire talent, because nowadays the young talent are looking for a brand that they can actually connect in a higher level. It's not about just a transaction. It's about connection, about holding that flag that I work here. What's your opinion on that?
Hiring 100%. It's interesting. People will ask, how do you train on values? How do you make sure that happens? And honestly, training the values starts at the interview process, because the recruiting process and interviewing process, because that's when they start to feel and hear and understand what the brand is about. And if we don't articulate, we're not hiring the right person. And if we're not asking that behavioral-based questions based on our values, then we aren't hiring the right person. And so we can't get frustrated in 6 months when we recognize, this person isn't the right fit. Well, chances are we didn't ask questions that fall back onto our values. So that's 100% so important.
Like you are saying about now translating that mission, that values into action, right, with the staff. And the hotelier may be a little bit confused on that. How can you actually turn this mission and values to tangible actions that will affect the guest experience, for example?
So this is where hotels miss their mark, 100%. And did you know that only 10% of companies actually operationalize their values? That's it, 1%, period. Values are the decision makers of the company. They have to align with all the decisions, like hiring we just talked about, right? And so we have to make sure we're defining our values according to how we want them represented. So get specific, because if we don't, it's led to misinterpretation. So for example, if you say, what's your definition of success? That's your value. Well, your definition and my definition of success are going to be different. So we have to be very clear first. Once we say these are our values, define them. And then we start looking at the tangible experiences. And what does that mean? once you have them define the guest and employee experiences. Okay. So for example, if the hotel says their value is being bold, they're bold. Okay. So how does that show up in the property? How does that show up in each department? That's really important to say, okay, bold and edgy is how we're going to be greeting our guests. Because chances are, if you're bold and edgy, you will not be greeting your guests with Mr. or Mrs. You're going to have a different shift, not right or wrong, but it's how you're defining each of these things. And it takes time because this is who you want to be and how you want to show up and your employees to show up. So it's really, really important to define your values and then look into specifics.
Now, you said something that's a very big question right now, because you said like that the values are different and you need to be clear on what is your intention behind these values. So who are the stakeholders that are making that decision of what the mission and the values are? Is that the general manager? Is it the owners? The shareholders? Who is actually building this mission and values?
I think it's interesting. I think it depends on respective area. It might be the owners. Sometimes owners want to be very involved and they're very clear because they're putting the money behind it. Or sometimes owners are just like, I want to be the silent partner and financially successful and tell me what you need from me. It could be the general manager and the executive team. I think it varies depending on who is involved, but whoever's involved has to be very passionate. If they don't understand and they don't know the purpose of culture, they should probably not be part of the meetings because this is the foundation of everything.
And you mentioned before about the standards and how they are the bones of everything of the hotel operations, but not the soul. But how can then hoteliers really develop some standards that are aspirational but actionable and connected to the values and the mission of the company?
Yeah. So my approach to everything in life is less is more and disrupt the norm. I like to disrupt things. Probably why we created Curated Critique to really push, companies a little bit further to think about their why and really to always start with your why and what's your purpose and start with one, you develop the values before the standards, because if you don't have your values developed, you can't put standards to them. So if you have well-developed values, then you can really look at each standard or what you want to execute it, right? The value is your why, and then your definition of it is your how. And the standard is your what you're going to do to make it come alive. And so that's when you really have to get creative. The biggest thing when you talk about values, you find them on the website and the employee cafeteria. That doesn't do anything. That's just written collateral, whether it's digital or on the wall. And until we actually make those come alive through your interviewing, through your guest experience, through your products. With products, if you have values and you always want it to be, so for example, older or bolder edgy, your couch that you purchase should probably look, or the carpet should reflect that and not just have this, leather sofa. There has to be something that makes it unique, that lines up to the value. So it's in the experiences, the service.
You've been working most of your career about developing people and to achieve their goals, right? What role does staff training play in embedding the brand values into the operations?
That's 100%, right? That's where the soul comes into life. Like I said, when we start to look at values, because we start there at recruiting and hiring, we're finding the right people. So when we get them and onboard them and they're in our first training class, we aren't necessarily training them on the values. We're showing them how we're living them from our perspective, because if we've done the proper hiring, they're already aligned. So now we just have to refine it and fine tune them to have them think it in our brand philosophy and not start with that square peg and really have to shave it down to put it into the circle. We don't want that. If we're taking a square peg and we're chopping away at it. Like, we got to do this and this. And chances are they're never going to be part of our value system. And that's okay. Know that. And we'll know that very quickly. And so that's why I always say we never want to compromise on our values. I know you asked about training, but this is where it really begins. And so when we get to training, it makes it so much easier because they're bought in, because they know who they are and who they're working for. And they just automatically start consuming the training differently. And they want to do it because they believe in the bigger picture and the mission and the vision of the company. So that's the ideal training. That's the ideal.
Okay, now but you show me an ideal scenario, and I don't believe that the hoteliers have that ideal scenario in their hands. That they are getting a mix of people from everywhere. They probably their own fault about the hiring process. Sometimes not. Sometimes just people change as they are working, and life change. Some situations change, and they change as well. How would you suggest, like, the hoteliers to prepare the training that would align with that values and mission that they have?
So you always step back and say, what are we trying to accomplish? I don't know why, but many times just haven't had the right trainer. Sometimes when people hear training, they immediately say, I have to do that. So if you put the purpose and the understanding of the why and how it's going to benefit them, especially when we talk about adult learning, because people come from experiences, people have worked other places. So we have to set them up for success. So before we get them into the training, we have to make sure they understand how it benefits them to create the buy-in. So that creates the willingness to accept this new information. Whether they've done it for 50 years, 5 years, or they're brand new, they know how what's in it for me, right? And so it's the mindset shift before they get into the training. The other thing too is once you get them there, of listening, because chances are they know already. And so by asking the right questions, you're training backwards. You're validating what they know. You're hearing what they know. And if you need to say, you know what, let's step back and look at it from our perspective of the hotel. How would you handle this? What does that look like? And they will, I would say 9 times out of 10, give you the exact answer. Instead of saying, okay, let's start at step 1, step 2, step 3, because they're going to be like, I know this. I've been doing it for 20 years. You're not showing me anything different. However, if we flip the training on them and say, hey, I know you've been doing this for 20 years. Tell me, how do you think, knowing our brand and our values, we should execute this? And it's incredible. The buy-in, they feel they're engaged and getting their experience shared. So that is the other ideal scenario too, by having those conversations instead of saying, let's get out the big standard book and start at number 1. It's really a mindset shift when you talk about adult training.
I love that. I love that to switch back and actually open these open questions, right? That make them collaborate, then they think through and feel that they are adding value to whatever they are doing. Love that, Mary. And when it comes to actually measuring the success of your work, of putting all these values and mission, and then you went through the work. It is painful. We are working here in my job here. We are doing the same. So I know how hard it is, right, to change, to have that shift in the head of the teams, the managers, and everyone involved. But how can you then measure if that effort was a success or something that needs to be adjusted?
That's an interesting question, because I think most hotels right now will look at their social media, sentiment surveys. They might also look, if they do standards measurement, they'll probably look at those. And while all of those have a purpose, you actually measure the effectiveness of your brand, right? Of your brand. And so honestly, that's why we started Curated Critique, because it's customized to you. And how do you want to live, and not someone coming in with a standardized checklist of what you should or shouldn't be doing. It's how do you want to be known? So when you're able to articulate, this is what we're doing, this is how we're going to do it, and to have someone come validate what you're doing to measure the effectiveness and if it's happening. So if you have a new, spa treatment or a new for the bar, whatever that looks like, a new standard of greeting, right or wrong, good or bad. It's just, okay, tell me, what should we expect with this new greeting? And we're not there to say everyone has to say 3 times in an interaction or shake their hand or smile or whatever it is. Tell us what we should expect. And that's what we measure. So if you are going to greet us because you're bold and edgy with a high five and a peace sign, great. I'm sure all that training happened. So when the employees see us, they are high-fiving galore and throwing the peace sign out. We're not judging if that's good, bad, right, or wrong. If it's bold, edgy vibe, that's awesome. Are you doing it though? And that's when we can go in and measure to see the success of it. And we always like to talk about measurement in 3 ways because I think it helps the pressure of the owners and operators because it doesn't always have to be so cut and dry. And we like to talk about aim goals. So A for achievable, I for ideal, and M for minimal. And so if you're looking at a standard and you say, this is our ideal and perfect scenario, and you know what, I'll be successful if we hit our minimum, which is this. And if we can get somewhere in that sweet spot of achievable, we're happy. And so you might start with that ideal and say, you know what, whatever influence, whatever happened, we might have to shift it a little, but at least you have a goal of what you're going to hit. So you're not failing. You're consciously making the decision. It's still a win. There's nothing wrong with it because you have decided that in the very beginning.
I love that. Can you repeat aim? Is achievable?
Achievable.
Ideal.
Minimum.
And me. Also, I love that. I like when you use acronyms too. But it's actually with an aim. So I love that one. And when it comes to mistakes or pitfalls that the hoteliers make when implementing either brand standards or actually trying to do the work to build their missions and values, what have you seen there that you can share with our audience and they can avoid making the same mistakes?
Yes. So I have a couple. Don't jump on a trend. Don't jump on a trend. And if you like the trend, throw it against your values. If it hits all your values, go with it. If it doesn't, don't. It's a trend for a reason. See something that you like at another property and immediately try to do it at yours. Step back and say, even though they're like, oh, this would be awesome, let's do it, and we're all excited. Step back and say, okay, I like this concept. Does it work for us? And if it does, how are we going to make it our own and not just copy and paste? We don't need to copy and paste, right? You're an independent for a reason. Let's make it unique to you. So really focusing on that to be intentional. And so often we have our PR marketing teams that come up with this clever, cool, fun things to showcase our brand, which is awesome and needed. And what happens is we don't operationalize it. So if you have this cool marketing program right now, or you have these cool taglines, and I say, hey, how have you operationalized this tagline? Don't let there be silence. I want to hear everything you're doing to live that. So don't just stop at the fun marketing piece that's out there, because the guest will feel or questioning like, this isn't reflecting what I've read online. This doesn't reflect, it's not coming to life. So if someone says we offer unique experiences, okay, tell me more about that, because the sea, the sun, and the sand are not unique. And also throw out there, doing local stuff is not unique. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but how do you take that and dive deeper? Like, you have to get deeper, because everyone's doing local. Big brands are doing locals, independents are doing local stuff. Not right, not wrong, but what is that going to be special for you? Take it. I'm going to push you to go further with that. A thing that happens too that I think is a pitfall is, one, we have a lot of managers coming from different places. And let's be honest, they probably take standards from where they used to work and they say, I'm going to use it here at this property. And then you have the food and beverage person saying, I'm coming from here, I'm bringing my standards from this place. Now we have a mixed match collection of different standards from different past experiences that we have not taken the time to standardize the essence of our property. So there's not the same tone of voice running throughout. It's this feels like this brand over here, and this feels like this restaurant over here, instead of saying, this feels like our brand collectively. Time to really operationalize your brand and standards according to your brand and not pick and choose from your past experiences. Just going to say it's a reality, right? I mean, and you know where you've come from. And we tend to rely on that because we don't have enough time, or I'm really busy, we're understaffed, all the things. But that doesn't mean we can't step back and say, how do we make this look and feel where we work right now? I think that's a really important thing. And the other thing I hear from independents sometimes too, we don't need standards. We don't need standards. And I always push back. You've heard that one, right?
Many times.
Many times. Isn't it interesting? Okay, so I'm going to say yes and. So yes, I totally agree. You don't need standards that are the same as everyone else's. And you need standards that reflect your brand. Because if we don't have standards that reflect your brand, how do you show the team how to live the brand you've designed? So there are your standards. You don't have to worry about everyone else's standards. And this is the cool part, right? This is why you created your independent brand and didn't decide to go with a flag. So you're not doing the standards as everyone else. You get to do your own, but you need standards to maintain that consistency and the voice of the brand.
Thank you for saying that. So it's not coming from my mouth, but it's true, right? Like in my conversations, I hear mainly when it's like family-owned or small hotels that we don't need standards. Like we've been with the same team with 20 years or so. But you can see from the reviews that things change over time. As we just discussed before, people change. And if they don't have a guide, if they don't have the north to follow, they will follow their own instincts, right? And they will fall into different habits. And when you see your idea of a hotel completely change just because the people change and you never actually standardize that intention. So please, intention, have your standards in place. Mary, if I would ask you, like, what mainly someone that may be getting excited about building their values if they haven't done so and having a mission and implement all this, how long does it normally take for a hotel that hasn't done that before to have it and start working with it?
That's a really good question. It does take a while, right? I would say at least 3 to 6 months minimum. Can you do it quicker? Yes, but everyone has to be on board, and that has to be your number one priority, because you have to really have a lot of conversations, because you're building the future, right? You're creating your legend today. And so by creating a legend today, that doesn't happen overnight. Was it Messi's quote? He said, I became an overnight sensation in 15 years of work, right? So same thing, we don't want to rush our values. I know we want to open because we are in a business and we want to make money, but let's make sure we're taking the time to build it right, because without cutting corners, that saves you a lot more money in the long run. Because otherwise you're going to have to keep going back, whether it's not having the right people in place, not having the right products, we've compromised on guest experiences, maybe we really don't know our purpose and our why. So when you really hone in and focus on that, the return is way more, say a solid 3 to 6 months.
Well, it doesn't sound so long. It doesn't sound. And Mary, can you start dreaming about the future, okay? And here a few questions that we're going to ask that's very feet on the ground, but I will make the disclaimer anyway. And the disclaimer is that we're not trying to predict the future. We are just brainstorming about the future, okay? So don't put all your money in with the things that we say here, but do listen, do learn, and take that into an inspiration to how you will make your own decision when it comes to where you're taking your brain. But disclaimer being made, here is where we try to dream a little bit about what's going on and what can happen in the future. And if we think about this personalized service, operational efficiency that we've been talking about and delivering the brand promises, is there any type of technology that can help the hotelier?
I think it really depends on property. I think it really depends on the brand and how much of an investment they want to make in it. right or wrong, good or bad. I think it's going to be, what's their goal or purpose? And I don't know if they just have to show up. Do they want to focus more on technology? Do they want to focus more on engaging the guest? I really think that's something that they have to decide on, is how much AI they want to start incorporating, because as we know, it's right here at our doorstep, and Lord knows the future that we don't even know about is already right behind it. I think it's just really understanding how much you want to bring it in, and once you bring it in, do you have the right setup to execute on it? Do you have the right people who want to use AI and technology? So I think it's really a brand specific. And if there's some old school brands, you're like, I'm just going to have a lot more people here because I just want it all about connections, and that's it.
Yeah, and now you said something that I love, right? It's about how your guests basically and what type of experience they are from your brand. And as we move towards the younger generation becoming that purchasing body, right? Like we're changing it slowly from who we're buying, and we're getting that generation that's more the millennials, let's say. Yeah, I am a millennial, so millennials or generations that getting more into they are connected the whole time. They are always connected, and how this demographic will change the expectations of the hotel, like the hotel experience as well, and how their values will change how the hotel sell.
I'm going to take it one generation further, because if we haven't changed for the millennials yet, I'm not saying we're in trouble, but we have to already be there present, because they are the ones spending money, and they're, whether they're families or they're traveling overseas or connected. What I would really focus on, because they are coming quickly and they are spending money, is the Gen Z. Gen Z is more intentional with their travel. They aren't just looking for sun or sea or sand or room with a view at all. They're not going to be looking up and checking out the cleanliness. Like, they just expect all that stuff to happen. And so they're looking for unique experiences and places that align with their values, which is why I know I probably sound like a broken record, why values is so important. And I really want those hoteliers to be set up for success, to recognize you got to be clear and intentional, because this is what they're looking for when they go on your Instagram page, when they go onto your website. That's what they're looking at, like how these experiences are being offered that align with my values. That's how they're traveling. And honestly, Gen Z prefers at boutique or independent or Airbnbs over big brands. That's not as important to them. And so see that happening. Brands, the big chains, are buying up these small brands and independent hotels, because they recognize that they can't get there quick enough if they try to do it on their own. And so I'm really curious to see how they're going to maintain the integrity of the small brands and independents that they're buying up, and not streamline it from a business perspective in the long run, because Gen Z is truly looking for listeners. They want to stay. And so they're really looking for the meaningful travel journey, which is why it's so critical to really deliver on your brand promise.
Do you hear that, hoteliers? Do you hear that? Because they are watching you.
They are, and they will write about you. They could be your best marketers, and they're your best marketers or your worst marketers, right? They have no problem getting that out there, and let them, right? And I think that's great. This is free marketing and advertising. Just make sure you're doing what you say you're doing and who you are for them to go, and you get free marketing, and they pay to stay there.
100%. Mary, thank you so much. It was an awesome conversation with you. How can our audience get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can either email me, mary@kyaniteandco.com. You can go to our website, kyaniteandco.com. Find me on LinkedIn, Mary Mattson-Quagliana, and I'm always happy to connect and speak to fellow hoteliers.
Mary, we'll put all the links down in the notes here so our audience can just click and get in touch with you. I just very grateful to you for your time. Thank you so much for sharing everything with you. with us today. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you, Maurizio. It's a pleasure.
Sure, and thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye.